Hello everyone and welcome back to the Football Forecast. In today's video I'm going to be going through every Premier League game for Game Week 4, giving my score, maybe who I think will perform well. And if you do enjoy the content, it would be great if you could subscribe and like the video, as it really helps me grow the YouTube channel. The first game of the week is between Arsenal and Nottingham Forest, and this is going to be a very interesting game for many reasons. First of all, Ange Postecoglou has just come into Nottingham Forest after the sacking of Nuno. Does that increase the chances of Nottingham Forest managing to take something from this game? Probably not. I think this actually will put them in a lot of doubt of managing to win this game. Ange has only had a couple of training sessions with Nottingham Forest, as well as him not being able to implement his style of football, but it may actually be better if they go and play the Nuno style just for this game, as it could be very difficult to win against Arsenal in the style of football you'd expect he will want to play. So, who are the key players out for Arsenal? Clearly, so we got White out. That shouldn't be too much of a problem because Timber can replace him. Saka's out, but Madueke's looked really good so far for Arsenal. Jesus out, obviously not too much of a problem because of Gyökeres, and that applies for Havertz too. And Saliba's out. I think that's probably the biggest loss, Saliba or Saka. Saliba's and Mosquera will come in. Mosquera looked pretty good on his debut. But where do I see this game being won and lost? It's going to come down, in my opinion, to how Arsenal sort of select their team and how they go about this game. For me, Arsenal need to go really attacking in this game, and they need to pick creative players. Now, this is slightly different now, the fact that Ange is in charge, but I'm still going to go on the fact that Forest are probably still going to set up reasonably defensive. So, who would I be picking for Arsenal? I think they need to pick players like Eze. I think they need to pick players like Madueke, players that could probably break down a low block. Gyökeres, and then if it's not working, I would actually so then I'd probably go Ødegaard, Rice, and Zubimendi. But what I would do is if they can't break it down initially, I would put Eze into midfield. I'd probably put Madueke on the left, and then put Wanyeri on the right. Just to get as much creativity as they can, and maybe you bring on Max Dowman as well, because that will be the question: can Arsenal break down the low block? But it may not be as much of a low block as usual because obviously Nuno has been sacked. So what is my prediction for this game? I'm going to go with a 3-0 win for Arsenal. I think they'll score early and then they'll sort of just keep adding on to those goals. And who do I put down? I think Madueke is in such good form. I reckon he will get a goal, or if not a goal contribution. So that would be who I'd be chucking a bet on if you're interested. So we've got a South Coast derby between Bournemouth and Brighton. Is it a derby? Not really. It's between sort of two sides. They've only just sort of arrived in the Premier League in the last sort of 10 years. But, I mean, this is two sides who are very similar in that sense. They've just arrived from the Premier League sort of 10 years ago, and they've had a very similar model recently of sort of signing younger players and then selling it to bigger teams. And they've both been really successful at that, and they're two of the best run clubs in the league, it is fair to say. So what do I see from this game? I think this is going to be a very interesting game. Brighton have struggled, but then they really played well against Manchester City. Bournemouth, on the other hand, have played very well so far and really look like a threatening side. And for that reason, I'm going to go with a 2-1 win for Bournemouth, and I reckon Harry Brooks will get an assist. That would be my advice for a bet, because Brooks has been creating a lot of chances for Bournemouth so far this season. So, moving on to Crystal Palace versus Sunderland, and I think if Adam Wharton was not out of this game, I'd almost give Sunderland no chance. But I think the fact that Adam Wharton is out because of injury, Crystal Palace's best player, I think Sunderland still have a chance of maybe being able to nick this game, as Adam Wharton is just so crucial for everything that Crystal Palace do, and that is big. Sarr is also out for Palace, which is a big injury. Looking up, you've also got Ballard out for Sunderland, but I don't think that's as much of a problem. They've done a lot of business, and I think they'll be able to deal with the Ballard injury. But in saying that, I still can't see Crystal Palace losing this game, as they don't have a European fixture to worry about because it's international break, and I still think Crystal Palace will have enough quality to get the job done. And I'm going to go with a 2-1 Palace win. Sunderland look like a decent side, but I think that may be because of home form. Home form is what can keep Sunderland up, and that's about it. I don't think their away form is going to be particularly impressive. Who do I fancy for a bet? I would fancy Jean-Philippe Mateta. I know that's a bit generic, But I think in this sort of game, when you've got such a striker that's such a level above, I think someone like Mateta could definitely score. Or one of the defenders, because Crystal Palace were very good from corners and set pieces last year. I wouldn't be 100% sure about Gahey because of that situation currently there. I think if Gahey's in the starting lineup, I'd probably pick him as well. If not, I'd probably go with Lacroix, who was very good, or Chris Richards. So one of the defenders would be the other thing I look at. So, moving on to Everton Villa, and I think this is a very good game actually. I think this is a game between two sides that I think are going to be at a very similar level this season. I had Villa sort of around 7th, sort of 8th, and I had Everton in 9th place as my dark horse, and I think this is turning out to or it'd be quite a correct prediction, and even we could see Everton finishing above Villa this season, and I think this is set up for a very good game. Looking at sort of the two sides and their key players out. So Jared Brentford is still out for Everton as well as Patterson. For Villa, Onana's out. More importantly, though, one of their best players and most important players, Kamara, is also out. And that automatically, for me, puts Villa under a lot of pressure to win this game. And for that reason, I'm actually going to go for an Everton win. I think Everton are going to have some really good form at the start of the season, as long as they keep Grealish and Njai fit. For that reason, I'm going to go with a 3-1 Everton win. I think they really actually dominate this game. For a goal scorer, I fancy maybe a goal from Tarkowski from a set piece, but who I actually think will score is Iliman Njai. I just think Iliman Njai is such a talented player, and he's really going to prove this season how good he really is. I think Digne struggled defensively at points for Unai Emery, and if that's who he goes with, I think Iliman Njai could really exploit that off the right hand side. So that's who I'd go with. Fulham Leeds, and I think this is two sides that have started alright. I think Fulham were unlucky against Chelsea, and they also managed to nick a point against Manchester United and Brighton despite not playing too well. From a Leeds perspective, they obviously picked up a point against Newcastle, 3 against Everton, and a loss to Arsenal. Sort of, I would say, very good start also for Leeds actually. That's probably more points than you would expect from them. But Leeds have struggled away so far, obviously losing to Arsenal, but I think that's an expected loss. And I think Leeds are going to be similar to Sunderland. They're going to be very good at home, but struggle away from home. And that is exactly what I'm predicting to happen. I'm going to go with a 2-1 win for Fulham. And I think this will be Josh King's first goal for Fulham. He got one disallowed against Chelsea. I think he's going to get a goal against Leeds. Just to add something to that game, also Tanaka is out injured for Leeds, which gives them a massive disadvantage for this game. Tanaka is probably Leeds' most important and best player. This is two sides that are desperate to get their first Premier League win of the season. Newcastle and Wolves have not made impressive starts this year, and both mainly because you would argue disruptions. Obviously, Wolves not really knowing would Jorgen Strand-Larsen leave to Newcastle, and Newcastle not having a number 9 for their first 3 games. And there's just been some sort of unsettlement it's felt around these sides so far, and that's sort of reflected in their results. Newcastle lost to Liverpool, unlucky to lose though. They drew to Villa, probably should have won against Villa, and they lost, and they drew to Leeds, once again, could have easily won that game. So I think Newcastle, you can clearly see, it just needs to click. Looking at sort of how Wolves have started so far, 3-2 loss to Everton, I mean, that's concerning how many goals they're leaking. They also leaked 2 in the Cup, lost to Bournemouth away, and Wolves, and they lost 4-0 to Manchester City. So not very good signs here for Newcastle, and I think for Wolves, sorry. So I think that straight away puts Wolves at a disadvantage to win this game. Looking at who's out, I think Anthony Gordon's out for Newcastle, which straight away puts them under some pressure, as well as potentially Joe Linton and Ramsey. Strand-Larsen, those doubtful for Wolves, and that would be a massive injury. And I actually can't see anything still but a win for Newcastle. I'm going with a big win for the Newcastle. I think the Geordies get up and running. I'm going to go with a 3-0 win for Newcastle. And who I reckon will score, I reckon Voltemade will start, as I'm not convinced Johan Wissa is match fit. I think Voltemade will score on his debut, and that's who I'd be picking. So moving on to a London derby between West Ham United and Tottenham. I think this has got the premise of a good game. West Ham obviously won last time against Nottingham Forest 3-0, but I think it's fair to say Forest were pretty unsettled going into this game. And I don't I'm not sure if that shows sort of where West Ham are at, and I'm still not fully convinced them by them. Spurs, as we always see with Spurs, they win their big game against Manchester City and then they lose to Bournemouth at home. In saying that, Bournemouth have been an impressive team so far, so no real surprises to see Bournemouth getting the job done. Sort of looking at who's sort of unavailable for this game, Kulusevski's of course out for Spurs, as well as Dom Solanke and James Maddison. I think they can replace those players. I'm looking forward to see what Xavi Simons can do for Spurs. They've also got Kudus, who can play off the right for Kulusevski, if that's where they're sort of planning to play him, and Richarlison, as well as Mawani off the bench. And that is my goal scorer for this game. I reckon if Colin Mawani, I don't know if he'll start, but maybe he nicks one off the bench, so maybe chuck that bet on, maybe after he comes on, if he ever comes on. And I think Colin Mawani will score for Spurs in a 3-1 win for them. Moving on to Brentford, Chelsea. Brentford have struggled so far at points and haven't quite looked like the side that you would sort of expect from them. But I think this is reasonably understandable considering they have lost their manager Keith Andrews, they've lost Johan Wissa, and they've lost Brian Mbeumo. And this is sort of showing they look a bit unstable. They did, however, look very good in their win against Villa, but that was once again against another team that was quite unstable. So where is this game heading? I think we all know this is sort of going to end in a Chelsea win. Brentford have previously shown good home form and struggled away. So maybe this is a theme we're going to see. So I'm not still fully convinced that Chelsea will win this, but I do think they will just have enough to get over the line. And I reckon this will be a 3-1 win for Chelsea. And who I fancy to score a goal for Chelsea, I fancy Enzo Fernandez penalty, because I think Brentford might just give one away and Fernandez scores, but I'm not fully convinced by that, so that wouldn't be one I wouldn't pick. I'd probably go with something else other than that. Moving on to my team, Burnley versus Liverpool. So if you're going to go with any advice, probably not this game, because chances are I'm going to be biased because I'm a fan and I never sort of would think about sort of looking at what team to go with, especially not one that I support. So Burnley, I mean, they've actually started pretty well this season, I think. They obviously lost to Spurs, but then they won against Sunderland, and then they narrowly lost to Manchester United, but I think they're pretty unlucky to concede that penalty in the last minute. So I think Burnley so far can go, you know what, we've only got 3 points, but we've got 3 points from 3, and we've looked like a decent side. But I just can't see anything but a Liverpool win, and I'm never going to go with not a Liverpool win in this sort of situation. I think Liverpool are going to thump them, to be honest, but I'm just going to hold it back because I'm not so convinced about who we've sort of got fitness-wise. We often struggle with the first game back after the international break. Obviously, an example of this is last year against Nottingham Forest. We have quite a few South Americans, and that's sort of just what happens. They come back a bit slow, but we are without Diaz and Núñez now, so that might not be as much of a problem. But in terms of someone like Alexis McAllister, who's essential, he may not be fit to play in this game, we often see. And for that reason, I'm just going to go with a 3-1. I'm going to go with a 3-0 win, actually. And I do fancy a goal for Cody Gakpo, because he often just goes under the radar, I think. But Gakpo is just so underrated as a player. Moving on to the final game of the weekend, and it's of course the Manchester Derby. And I mean, this game is just filled with injuries and two sides who have not started well this season. Manchester United have once again shown their struggles, even though in some performances I think they've played better, and in the games they've maybe done well and they haven't actually performed that well. So it's a bit of an interesting concept with them. Manchester City, they played well in their game against Wolves, but played pretty bad, played terribly against Spurs and Brighton, and that's sort of why they are in both of these teams are in this situation. So injuries, that's the big story for me in this game. Kushinov out for Manchester City is doubtful, actually. Gvardiol is doubtful. Who else have we got? Kovacic might play, he's doubtful. Nico O'Reilly's doubtful. Marmoush is out with a knee injury. Cherokee is out, and Savinho is potentially out, as well as Rico Lewis. Then looking at sort of United's injuries, Martinez is obviously out, Mount could be out, and Cunha is out. So what would I do in this scenario for these teams? I think Manchester City still have the players to sort of play how they want to play, but I don't think they look very dangerous on their wing. I just don't know about Doku and most likely Savinho or Bob. Oscar Bob seems a talent, but it's just sort of the instructions that Pep gives to his wingers. It's sort of very laboured. It's not all about sort of the wingers making the game themselves. It's sort of about sort of a system, and for some that doesn't worry me as sort of an opponent fullback. So I think they should be more worried about sort of the middle of the pitch. Should Manchester United, who would I play up front for Manchester United? Well, Cunha's obviously out. I think this is the time to play Bruno as the left 10, and then play Buemo is the right 10 and Sesko up front. I think you can finally get Bruno into his right position, and let's see how good Bruno is when he's slightly further forward, because I think he's been under par in the sort of 8th position this season, and I think that's understandable because Bruno doesn't really suit that role. So I do think Manchester United are better off going to that than chucking in someone else, maybe like Xerxes if Mount's available. So that's what I would do, and then I'd probably bring in, I guess, Kobbie Mainoo. I haven't really liked what I've seen from Ugarte so far, so probably Kobbie Mainoo. Kobbie Mainoo's got to play. There's a reason he's at such high demand from other clubs. Like, there's links with Real Madrid. I'm sure most teams in the world would take a player like Kobbie Mainoo as at least sort of an option for the future. So I think Manchester United have just got to use him more. I do actually see an upset in this game, and I am going to go with a 2-1 win for Manchester United. I really see an upset in this game. It's just very typical Manchester United. They struggle against the sort of lower down teams and then do very well against the better teams. I know that didn't apply for Arsenal, but their performance once again suggested that. Or if you want to go with a goal scorer for Manchester City, I fancy Tijani Reinders. I think Tijani Reinders will be able to sort of exploit Manchester United's midfield issues, and he'll probably arrive late in the box, especially if Bruno Fernandes does play deeper like I wouldn't do, then I definitely think Reinders can exploit that. So if you see Bruno in that starting lineup in the 6 and the 8, that is who I would go for. So that is the end of the video. If you did enjoy what you see, please like and subscribe and help me grow the channel. Just to make this obvious, these are not like actual advice, these predictions. This is just what I fancy, and if you please don't follow this advice if you think it's going to come in. It's just very much a luck of the draw thing, and this is just what I would probably fancy if I was to bet on certain games.